All right. Hello, friends. This is my fourth attempt to record this video because I am fucking incompetent. I have failed to set up my audio correctly twice. Yeah, twice, technically three times. The second recording, while my audio was still set up incorrectly, my demo went horribly wrong for a variety of reasons. Pray for me. Pray this is the last attempt. I did test the audio this time. I have a big box of a room right now temporarily. We're finishing a renovation. And so the echo is unbelievably bad. And you hopefully don't hear it because my GPU is cranking through NVIDIA's thing to remove all of that. So hopefully I sound mostly like myself. Um, anyways, this started because we're redoing the MCP website. MCP.Sentry.dev. If you're not familiar. MPC, that's the wrong one. That was scary for a second. It's this one, which is mostly just how to set up our MCP. There's also a live demo here, which would normally look like this. So this is what you see. MCP, cool. Doesn't matter if you know what it is yet. I'm about to sell you on this shit like no other. I want to redo the website because I'm very much like, how do I show how amazing this is? Like, how do I show that it is like genuinely legitimate? And part of this is because I need to convince a lot of people. Like, you're watching this, you're probably already convinced, but maybe you work at, I don't know, the Wells Fargos of the world, and they're like, maybe they've let you use Cursor or Claude Code, and they're like, fuck no on the MCP, you know? And there's good reasons for that. There's some security concerns that people are still working around, but we're a pretty trustworthy company, and the value is so good. Okay, so MCP, Claude Code is what I'm going to use today. It's really easy to set up. I'm not going to go through that. It's common. I mean, it's not a hard problem. It's like the easiest thing you can possibly do. So I have this error that we're going to work through. You'll see it right here. This is an error in our MCP server. It's already fixed now because, again, this is my fourth attempt, and I've actually already landed the fix and deployed it in production at this point. But I'm going to show you how I literally do not do anything, and I'm going to record this video and have the bug fix itself. And you probably think you know how this is going to go, and I know how it's possibly going to go, but it's probably going to look a little different for you. So one thing people like to do is copy paste, dump some stuff into an MCP or to an agent. Sorry, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of cases where that makes sense. For example, I'm setting up Next.js with Sentry. Maybe I'll just go in here and I'll grab the markdown of this page, which is slightly curated, and maybe it'll help. There's some cool ways to just dump context in, or I can just pass it the URL. Totally makes sense. But if we look at this, Zod error, failed to validate keys, blah, 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 truncated. Okay, well, I know what schema it is. It'll figure that out because it's got the line references and knows where it's at. It knows that it's expecting an array. It knows that these values are supposed to be there. How did it fail to validate? I don't know. Do you know? I certainly don't. There's no way you can know from this information. You could guess, which it will probably do. Now, there's some other information on this page that I could give it. Here's the actual validation errors. This is with one of our plugins. We have this Zod integration that you can just enable. And basically what it's saying is all of the values that we're expecting, and I just know this to be true, all of these are undefined. You know, here's a game. What do you think the agent would do right now if you gave it this error or you gave it this error? I'm betting what it would do is it would change every parameter to be optional. It'd be like, oh, to fix that error, I need to make them optional because clearly they can be optional because it errored. It's not wrong. That's actually totally true. And this is why LLMs are not the same as intelligence. But that's not actually the error if you ask a human. The actual error is it's returning something we didn't expect. So we have this product called Seer. What Seer is, the best way to think about this is an agent that we've been working on. This is not a pitch for it, but it tries to root cause this. And the brilliance of this is it's able to actually root cause it from information that is otherwise a little bit cryptic. And so I want to explain how you debug this as a human, and I'm going to show you in just like real time why you should not use Seer in our UI and where our weaknesses are and why you should use MCP. So Sentry had this thesis. This is pre-LLMs. And honestly, it's not a complicated thesis. It's like, yeah, duh. But somehow a lot of people in the world don't figure out this yeah, duh stuff. If you have a trace ID carried throughout your system, everything's more valuable. Like everything is much easier to debug. And a very good example of this is there's a good chance you know what Next.js is. There's a good chance you write JavaScript. There's a good chance you've seen an error that says something like an error occurred, and that's inside of Sentry, and it tells you jack all about what the error is, right? Like it's completely unusable information. There's also a good chance you've also got the error somewhere else in your system that tells you what the actual error is. And there's a good chance you have no idea which one pairs up with which one, right? Maybe you use Sentry, and then maybe you do, even though we're not perfect here by any means. But this is kind of the world we live in right now. And if you switch to something like Python and you use Sentry, we capture the error, 100% you know what's going on. You know the exact inputs, you know the problem. There's no cryptic source maps that you failed to set up correctly. There's no complicated technology that is like a black box for you to debug. It's straightforward, right? But that's not the world we live in anymore. There's a lot of overcomplicated technology. It doesn't matter if it needs to be or not. I'm not going to debate that right now. It just is the reality we have in front of us. So we see that, and we're like, we have these complicated distributed systems that are not built by systems engineers anymore. Like a lot of you probably writing Next.js have never worked on a real distributed system, which is totally fine. But now you are. You are, and it's a distributed system that is not designed to be easily debugged. And so we set out, we're like, you know what? We need to make this data more useful. And the best way we can do that is by connecting more pieces of telemetry. And so what I mean by that is, you probably heard of distributed tracing. It doesn't matter if you haven't. We have this concept of a span tree. When somebody says a trace, they usually need this thing right here, but that's not actually what a trace is. So this is a set of spans. They're events in a tree form, as in a call graph order, that have been called in the system. And in this one, they're literally network requests. So there's some other data in these. I'm not going to click into this because it'll probably expose some customer data. So you can try this out on your own. But this is really important. But what a trace is it's just this ID. It's the trace ID. That's actually all we care about. This is not a new concept. This has been around in system engineering for my entire career. You know, I'm 40 years old at this point. So 20 plus years, I've seen something like a request ID go through a system, which is just a trace ID. All it is a unique identifier that you try to carry through the entire lifetime of a request, meaning any event in the system that's associated with it, you can string together. And that was typically done via logs, right? Which, look at this, we got a log in here. Isn't that interesting? We've got trace connected logs. Because you know what's better than logs? Because logs kind of suck. When you can actually make use out of them, right? Every single data point in Sentry is trace connected. You might remember, in fact, we had a metrics product that we abandoned. We spent 6 months working on it. We threw it out. We threw it out because it was not trace connected. And we're like, you know what? That does not align with what we feel is the most important thing to do right now, because it is not useful in the world to invent yet another boring log engine or metrics engine that does the exact same thing somebody else does, right? What is better is when you have that one data point and it offers more value than it ever could have in the past. That's what we're trying to do. So we did this. We trace connected everything. We're still working on that, still making it useful. It's quite a hard problem. It's particularly hard with clients and all this, like JavaScript. And then LLMs came along. And if you're not really familiar with how LLMs work, you really just need to understand it's pattern matching. Yes, it's more complicated than that, but it is not intelligence. It's pattern matching. And I'm not here to get in a philosophical bullshit conversation about like, what is intelligence? Who gives a shit? It's pattern matching. It doesn't matter what that translates to, but it does matter that you can reason about how pattern matching can be applied. Particularly, we pattern match all the time. And so if I look at this and you give me all this information, I might be able to pattern match what the problem is. You can do the same thing with LLMs. The problem is it's often a lot of information, but LLMs, the beauty of them is potentially you can give them a lot more information all at once, and they can pattern match much more quickly than you can, potentially. Now, they also might pattern match incorrectly, and that's the flaw of the system. It's a little bit random, like a random number generator. What we've built in Sentry is we've taken that trace concept and we're like, oh shit, this is super valuable now. And this is a little bit unique to Sentry because you'll see a lot of other vendors, like they might, like a lot of people like to copy our product these days. They might have error monitoring or something, which is great. They probably just use our technology. They might have some other stuff, like a big company like Datadog has a bunch of this tech. but it's not connected it's not constrained in the same way our system is constrained. And what that has let us do is build this thing called Seer, which you might have heard of. We're not very good at marketing sometimes. What Seer does is it takes all this trace connected data, a bunch of technology we have, and it tries to do effectively a map reduce, which is, I guess, a little bit less map, but tries to take a bunch of this information and simplify it and summarize it. Some of that's because you have to for the sake of the LLM. Some of it's because it's just a lot of information that's wasteful if you don't. And so it takes all this information. We have a bunch of tools, a bunch of guardrails that feed into it, and then it tries to come up with a root cause. And so you should know this about Seer fundamentally. And Seer's a little bit complicated. We might rename this in the future again, but what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Seer is specifically our root cause analysis behavior. And that's this thing you'll find in the sidebar in Sentry. It's over here. You can set it up. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but none of this AI stuff is. We're a real company, so we try to just pass on the cost in a reasonable way. Hopefully it'll get cheaper over time. It might not. We'll see. But it's really good at root cause. Like, if I look in here, I want to show you the code. So I have this schema. I know it's returning an array, right? Like, and it's saying a bunch of this stuff is undefined. Interestingly, it didn't say it was all undefined, but that just might be Zod didn't return all the errors. But clearly it's returning something that is not a trace span schema here. And the way I would know to figure out what that is I would look at like the value here, the value of body, which I don't have. I don't actually have the value of body. Maybe I could find it. Maybe I could actually make the API request myself and get it, which I technically can. But let's just say I can't do that. I would have to go dig into the source code. Ideally, I would have to somehow figure out what that API endpoint is responding. That API endpoint, before we get into Seer, is actually in here. It's one of these spans. It's actually this span right here. And that may or may not be helpful in this case. That actually may have the exact information I need to debug it. I don't actually care to look at it. I'm not going to click around these things because that's not the point. And most importantly, that's not efficient. What I did have is I opened this page, and I opened this when I was ready to record this demo earlier today, and it had already run. This entire top thing was already here. I had to click find solution. It already actually had effectively 100% validated the root cause. And it wasn't just like, oh yeah, it's clearly returning something more than that schema you defined. It wasn't, these are actually optional attributes. It could have been, I don't know one way or the other, technically speaking. It says standalone errors are added to the root of the trace response. That is, this schema, the root, as in the array, can contain more than just span schemas. It can also contain errors. And when I ask people, I'm like, what the hell is up with this endpoint in Slack? As I'm looking at this, so I was looking for an example issue to build this demo on, And they're like, oh yeah, like we record all the things that go in the trace. I'm like, why? That makes no sense. And this is where it gets more fun. I said it made no sense. I'm like, this should just return spans. It's silly to return mixed object types in here. And interestingly, our technology agrees, and it thought the fix for this was to change the underlying service. This isn't even in this repo. This is another repo that's deeper in the trace. It's like, you know what? Let's not return errors, because clearly that's a bad idea. Now, this is not the right fix in this context, because this would break many other systems. But it's kind of funny, because that was kind of my conclusion of like, this shouldn't be this way. But that's a subjective conclusion. Anyways, this is wrong. And this is why I'm saying our product's not great in this regard. And we know that. We're working on that. We're also working on partnering with other folks who have specialized more in the code generation aspect right now. But this is 100% right. It's fucking dead on. And I did nothing. It was ready for me when I clicked into this issue. It was ready to go. It already identified the root cause. The solution is where it breaks down. And it breaks down in two ways here. First, fix the schema mismatch. Yeah, that's the solution. The schema is clearly wrong. But it thinks the solution is to return, like in this context, not obviously the solution it gave, but it thinks the solution, actually I'm curious here. Oh yeah. It thinks the solution is only to support spans and issues, where really what we need to do is support any number of unknown objects. Because actually all we wanted were spans in this case. And it doesn't quite understand that intent. This is probably something we can improve over time, but there's only so much you can do. That's fine. That doesn't matter though, because we're not using any of that. What we are going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to fix this the way I would fix this. We're going to fix this the way I would fix this. If I'm like, look how cool agentic coding can be sometimes. And fingers crossed, this does exactly what I want, because fourth time recording this demo. One time I got it completely wrong. Not completely wrong, but it guessed at the wrong thing. And the other two times it got it. One time it got it dead on right, and the other time it got it mostly right. I'll show you what I mean in a second. But how would you fix this? And this is why I love MCP. So MCP, I've got Sentry set up. Coming soon, the Spotlight MCP. It's going to be sick. This is really easy to set up. I'm not going to go through this, but it's dead simple. It's connected. How would you fix this? You don't do anything special. You just behave how you would normally behave. And this is why it's beautiful. And this is why I love this, and why I feel so strongly that we've already nailed the product UX. And so I want to fix. Can you fix this? I'd probably just say fix URL and it would do the same thing. But, I'm trying to be like a little bit, nice. And let's see what happens. Fingers crossed. All right. So what's happening? I'm going to walk you through it because I don't actually have to do any work, hopefully. What it does first is it calls a tool called get issue details. And what you might think is, especially if you've ever used Sentry's API, is maybe that's just calling issue details endpoint, which it certainly is, but it's not just doing that. Just as this UI right here is not just that endpoint, this tool is not just that endpoint. And it's certainly not the JSON return from that endpoint. It's actually giving you a very specific response. And I'll show you some of it in a second in our test suite. I'm not going to load this because it might have some customer data in it. But it's giving a curated response. And it's actually calling a number of API endpoints. So it's calling get issue details. It's calling something that gets this event details, because it's actually just an event inside of an issue. So we're getting this event. It's also calling Seer at the same time. And it's bundling all that up into something that is opinionated, something that I decided was the right answer, that is trying to find the balance of how many tokens it consumes. I'm not min-maxing this, but I'm very much not just throw every piece of information in here, because it's just going to consume your context window. We all know how painful that gets. Compactions suck. And so I'm like, what is the actual useful information you need? And we're not being super scientific. This is all just subjective taste. And so it's the stack trace. It's a little bit of the source context. It actually looks pretty similar to this. Surprise, surprise. It's some of the other things on the page, like the context. I think this is in there. It is actually not the trace yet. I might add that later, like the trace summary, which is very different than the full trace, but that's not a big deal. But it's what is useful, right? We're trying to give you a high level balanced amount of information. We're not going to give you everything no matter what. If nothing else, because we're never going to make money that way. This got to be real. We need to build some technology to make this cost effective for us. And that technology is going to live on our server. And Seer is part of that, right? We're not going to build all that into an open source MCP server that everybody just rips off and copy paste like they do the rest of our product. And so we are trying to do this in a thoughtful way that gives you a lot of value. Honestly, even if you're not using Seer, many times you don't need Seer at all enabled, and it's still going to nail it just from the stack trace or just from some of the other context. But it does that. In that response, it also knows that it can call this, which is analyze issue with Seer. And what this does is it basically says, has a run already happened? Which in my case, it's already happened. I have this set up to run automatically whenever Seer has a high confidence of being able to generate a fix or identify a real problem. Which, if you're not familiar, because we got some UI to do here, this little cog up here lets you adjust automation for Seer. Again, this costs money, but if you're at a company, it's actually pretty cheap. If you're a hobbyist, it could get expensive. So you know how this works. But you can kind of set it up to run automatically. The automation goes from this high level confidence check, which is dirt cheap. We don't charge you. I think we're making that free. To this whole root cause thing, which this is kind of expensive for us to actually run, because it's a lot of data that goes in the system and whatnot. Anyway, so we take that. It pulls something similar to what you see in the API down, or in the UI down. This is calling the endpoint for the agent, the Seer endpoint, which technically is public. If you are a third-party company, don't consume this endpoint without talking to us. There is no guarantees of anything, and we don't want people costing our customers lots of money. So even though it is a public endpoint, the design is not just you randomly start building products around this endpoint. I just want to caveat that. But it is calling that, which gives us roughly this. It's the same endpoint the UI actually uses to render. And now it's implementing the fix. So what's kind of interesting about this, and it's gone a little bit slower, unfortunately, than earlier. It's usually done by now, is we have this problem in here. Update trace schema to accommodate serialized issue. This is where it breaks down. And so do I have an issue schema in here? I want to show you this because I have an issue schema right here. This is not what it returns. And when it broke earlier, it tried to set, it thought this kind of schema is what it was going to return. And the problem is I'm not actually sure how it would correctly understand what the right schema is. This is closer. But you'll know that's wildly different than this. This is also not the right answer, unfortunately. But this is not wrong. It's just missing a bunch of objects. The exact structure varies. That's kind of interesting, though, because I actually don't know the exact structure. And Claude, unfortunately, can also not know it. Seer could. So Seer's solution actually could have been prescriptive, and it actually could have told me the exact schema structure I needed. It didn't. I wish it did. Maybe we'll get there. That's feedback for us. But this is at least not broken. I'll show you what I mean, because if you return this other schema, it's very plausible it would be broken because I've actually seen the payload. And it looks closer to like this because the project ID, project slug, there's just some different values there. It's not really an issue schema. It's my main point. And so we have this concept of an issue object type in our API. And again, API design, not perfect. You know, it's not criticism about that, but it is not the issue object type that we're returning fundamentally. And so just by this name issue, it's going to pattern match into potentially the wrong things. In this case, it halfway did it right. I want to show you what I mean. This was the first run, which is really sad I messed up audio because I was like starry-eyed, like, holy shit, it did it perfectly. This is actually the answer I want. This whole patch is actually the answer I want. And let's see if it does the second part. It's probably not going to. The last two runs, it missed the second part of this, which I think would cause a bug in production. Okay, we're gonna let it continue, but this is the actual schema. It got a subset of this, but the rest is wrong. I'm not even actually totally sure why it decided the subset. If it just, you know, in its random number generator had enough training data from Sentry data that it knew, or if I have something else in my code base that was referencing it. I'm not gonna, there's too much going on. It's really hard to like scientifically look at things sometimes. Oh, it's going to fix the second part this time. Okay, so the second part it generally has messed up is this area. I guess that's okay. It took a different solution earlier, but we're using this data, as I showed earlier, I believe, to render. This is our get trace details tool. We use it to render this trace. This expects to be spans, which have a duration, which have a name or description or whatever it's called, which have these specific attributes, right? 2 out of 4 times, it skipped this entire thing and it would have passed these errors, which don't have the same properties, into this rendering function. I'm not totally sure what would happen, and I'm not totally sure why the type checker didn't catch it, because the type checker should be correct there. It should have caught it, but it didn't. And this is a really important thing to understand. You must test everything. That doesn't mean you have to test it by hand, but this is an automated test right here. What I should do, and maybe I'll do it in the sake of time since this is the 4th recording and I'm already running longer than the last recording, is I would then follow up and tell it to add a test. And that's actually easy in my test suite because I have mock service worker set up. I can easily wire up a dummy endpoint. It knows what the schema is, even though it's wrong in this case. And I can actually have it test that to make sure it's doing the right thing. That's really, really important with agents because, like, again, this is a slot sheet. This is not science. There's no intelligence in this. It's just pattern matching at the end of the day. It's going to get stuff wrong. If it can't validate it, it can never get it right. If you give validation and you can run that loop, it might be inefficient and not worth it. But at the very least, it might not, it's less likely, I should say, to be wrong, right? And so, okay, yeah, all the existing tests pass, but clearly you should add a new test. That's how you would do it as an engineer. So models, long ways to go. But I wrote no code in this time. It's not correct yet. In this case, you didn't quite get it right. Seer could be better. But it at least technically would have fixed the bug here. And what's really important here is the behavior, the output actually is still correct. I don't care about those errors. It's actually okay if the schema does not include all the fields. As long as it doesn't include them and render them and error out, we've actually fixed the bug. And that's the customer facing value. And so, like, that was it. And there's one more thing I want to show you as part of this, because I like to, I don't know, I'm like DevRel or something over here. I got to teach you everything. And mostly it's hard to teach how Sentry works because it's a lot of stuff. We have this cool feature that is kind of hard to set up, but if you set up all the bells and whistles of Sentry, okay, you have it connected to Git, and you have release tracking set up in a way where we can kind of figure out the commit graph. We have this concept where I'm just going to commit this, where we can actually do regression tracking. And I like to show this example because it actually demonstrates why MCP is great, or more particularly why APIs feeding into agents that are designed for agent consumption are great. And so this is not a CLI versus MCP argument. Obviously, you could build a CLI that is LLM specific, but MCP is already LLM specific. So this is an example response from the Git issue details. This doesn't have the Seer response in it. This is like an example where maybe Seer isn't enabled on an account. So ignore that. This is kind of what we return. You can see it's like pretty curated. We also return this little bit at the bottom. It's important. Triage to first party code. I don't remember why we have this, but ignore that. You can reference the issue ID and commit messages. Fixes this. And so if you didn't know what this is actually the short ID of an issue in Sentry. It's a globally unique identifier within your organization. You can kind of think of this like a ticket ID, like in GitHub or Jira. That's what it's inspired by. That's why they're called issues after all. If you reference this in your commit message, it will automatically close the issue when the commit is merged. And what's very fun is, I don't need this anymore. They did it. Fixes that short ID. I didn't even have to know how that feature worked. It just did it. And it did it because it was right here, right? That is cool. Like again, the goal is that this drops in. There's no prompt engineering. I work in a way my brain works. I tell it what comes out of my head, right? That is the way I would speak, the way I think. And it just did the correct thing. Obviously the patch was wrong or not thorough, if you will. But like, that is the beauty of this. It's like such a massive productivity boost. Because like, and what I tell the team is like Seer is great. The root cause is great. We got work to do on the solution side. The solution side is very, very hard, to be fair. But I don't want to go into the UI and click this. What would be even worse is if I don't have automation on. I'll show you what that looks like real quick. If I didn't have automation on, which is here. No, it's not here. Scan, auto trigger. Oh, we actually have to set up to all issues, but you can kind of decide. You might say, I think we learned that moderate, depending on your price sensitivity, moderate is really good. We're just running on all because we can funnel the money into it right now. But if I didn't have that on, importantly, this page, this would not have that much information by default. We'd love to run this automatically. It's just too expensive right now, but I would have to wait on it. And that it's just, we'll probably find ways to make it faster, but you know how this goes. These LLMs are often not fast, and that's often okay. But if I have a brand new error and I'm going to debug it and I'm like, I got to wait for this thing to run, I may or may not have time for that. And so that's a big deal. It changed the entire game because what I want to do is, again, I just want to go to this page. I want to drop the URL in. Or better yet, maybe I can be like, I don't know, fix the most recent issue fun. This is not called, by the way. It's the most recent issue. It'll query for it. It'll do some cool stuff. There's actually a bunch of cool things the MCP can do. We'll let this go. It may or may not work in the background. Even if it does, it's probably going to do something whack. I'm going to end it there. What I would like to say is if you have feedback, I'll want to hear what sucks. I particularly want to know what breaks in the MCP workflow for you. Like if you put the way your brain works into text and it does something whack or it doesn't do what you expect, I want to know. Open an issue on GitHub, find my email, DM me, I don't care. If you have feedback for Seer, like if it doesn't work, we obviously know that the solution side needs a lot of work and we're figuring that out. But if you have feedback and you use it and it's not working great, click this little button over here to give us feedback and please just do. Like, and if you find some great scenarios, we're like, holy shit, that blew my mind. Tell us about it. If you really like it and you're appreciative, tell other people about it. We'd love to hear it. Like people love validation, obviously. But we're really looking to understand where it does and doesn't work right now. We obviously have a lot of ideas, but the more, the better kind of in that. You can see over here, it's there's a Claude bug. I don't know what this is. I started hitting this earlier today. They keep breaking this shit. Interrupt that. It's going to do wild shit at this point. I'm not going to show you that. By the way, if you hit this, because I hit this earlier when I was first recording on MCP, the way I fixed this earlier is I just went reconnect. And I don't know, maybe there's something we're doing wrong on our server now or something. Who knows? The protocol is quite needlessly complex. If you're working on the protocol, it is. It's just the truth. You should do something about it. It should just be HTTP. Post a request, receive a response. But when it works, it's great. And I've never had these issues before today, to be fair. So I'm going to call it there. Reach out if there's feedback. Hopefully you learned something here. I know 30 minutes is a lot of time. I talk fast, so it's also hard to speed up the video sometimes. But yeah, thanks for watching.